Hey there. I'm really glad you're here tonight. Let's leave the noise of today behind and wander quietly into another world. A world of golden sunlight and slow-moving rivers, of cool stone temples and silent, watching statues. Tonight, you'll imagine what it might have felt like to wake up, not as yourself, but as someone both powerful and alone. A pharaoh, the divine ruler of all ancient Egypt, draped in linen and mystery, surrounded by servants, secrets, and the heavy weight of the gods. But don't worry, there's no rush to understand it all. We'll move gently through this imagined life, from the moment your eyes open in a royal chamber, to the duties, the rituals, and the quiet loneliness that came with wearing a crown shaped like eternity. This isn't history told loudly. It's a soft unraveling of the past, designed to ease your mind and help you drift into deep, restful sleep. So, if you feel yourself beginning to slow down, if your eyes grow heavier as the story unfolds, and if this little corner of the internet brings you a moment of calm, feel free to gently like this video or subscribe if you'd like to come back for more sleepy history. Now breathe in slowly and breathe out. You're safe here, and you're exactly where you need to be. Let's begin your strange and royal morning. As Pharaoh of Egypt, you wake to the sound of nothing, no horns, no drums, no murmuring city, just the soft scrape of limestone being dragged over sand. A stillness hangs over the air. You are not in a palace. You are standing barefoot on a flat rock platform, surrounded by an expanse of construction, dust, and laborers. Your skin is dry, your body lean but adorned in white linen and golden collars. You are Joseph, the divine ruler of Upper and Lower Egypt, and today your architect Imhotep has asked you to look at something that might change eternity. What does it mean to be a pharaoh in the third dynasty? Not just a king, not a ruler. You rule a land stitched together by a river. The Nile is your lifeblood, but it is fickle. One failed flood and the grain runs out. One insubordinate mark, those regional governors, always hungry for power, and the whole region slips from your grasp. But none of that is why you're awake so early. I am Hotep, the high priest, architect, scribe, and perhaps the only man in your kingdom with the goal to make eye contact with you has brought you to He says the tombs of the dead no longer honor the gods or the rulers. Mastabas, the traditional flat-roofed tombs, are too humble, too human. He envisions something higher, a monument that rises toward the gods like a staircase, a step pyramid. At first, you resist. The idea is strange, radical. No one has done this before. Why build up when the dead lie below? But you trust Imhotep. He knows things. He measures stars. He talks to priests and masons in the same breath. He once stopped a plague by ordering nothing but a sequence of purification rituals and the release of stored grain. You wonder sometimes if he is more divine than you. As Joseph, your rule is a balancing act. You sit on the throne of Horus, where the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red of Lower Egypt, and hold the crook and flail of order and justice. But your real power lies not in Simbozet, lies in the stone. It's the one thing that might outlast you. Unlike the mud brick tombs of your predecessors, limestone is quarried, hauled, and shaped into permanence. It reflects the sun like a beacon. It dazzles. Imhotep insists that stone, not clay, is the material of God's dot. And so the plan begins. You sit in council with scribes, engineers, priests, and stonemasons. A stepped structure, 6 layers tall, rising above the desert. It will require thousands of laborers, but not slaves. That's a myth born from the ignorance of later empires. These are skilled workers, paid in beer and bread, fed with barley from your surplus granaries, directed by overseers who shout in rhythmic chants to coordinate the dragging of blocks. Sometimes songs are used to time the lifts, but progress is slow. Stone breaks, workers fall. Priests complain that such a structure might anger the gods. Who climbs to heaven but Ra himself? Who dares reach upward? Still, you persist, because death is certain, but memory is not. The pyramid rises slowly. Every day it casts a longer shadow. You visit often, despite court duties. You inspect the ramps. You bless the foundations. You listen to Imhotep's explanations. Over ventilation, shafts and subchambers. Some days you pretend to understand. Other days you don't. You spend long hours in the House of Life, the temple archive, reading what you can about the stars, funerary spells, and the legacy of kings past. You want your Kua spiritual essence to endure, not vanish into silence. That's when you start noticing something strange. The priests have begun whispering, not in defiance, but in awe. They say you are breaking the line between man and God, that this tomb will be your stairway to the afterlife, that in building a pyramid, you are building not a tomb, but a temple. You don't know whether to feel fear or pride. You just want not to be forgotten. Then comes a letter from the south. A nomarch in Elephantine is hoarding grain. He claims the Nile did not flood his region and begs forgiveness. Your advisors suggest a swift punishment, but you hesitate. You know the Nile has moods. It has rules older than gods. You send emissaries instead. Offer irrigation engineers, bread, assurance that Matawater is not built through cruelty, but continuity. The nomarch submits. Order returns, and your pyramid continues. At dusk, you stand at the top of the highest step completed. The desert stretches in all directions, painted gold and amber. You are alone, and for a moment, you feel as though you're standing outside of time. A king who dared imagine something permanent in a world of sand. And yet, you wonder, will the people remember your name or just the pyramid? Will the gods be pleased or challenged? What if this monument is not a bridge to the afterlife, but a monument to your own hubris? You sit beneath a tall palm tree within the palace courtyard. The walls around you are painted with lotus blossoms and blue cranes, symbols of rebirth and vigilance. The scent of pressed myrrh and old papyrus clings to the warm air. Your attendants murmur softly in the background, but you hear none of it. You're too busy watching a piece of chiseled limestone in your hand, a fragment fallen from the outer casing of your great pyramid at Saqqara. The stone is smooth, cool, and unremarkable at first glance. But you know better. It was quarried from Tura, ferried across the Nile, dragged by a team of 20 men, and fitted by hand. One block among thousands, and yet this one fragment has a story. Everything does now. The pyramid is nearly complete. It rises 6 steps tall, towering over the surrounding desert like a frozen echo of a staircase to the stars. Travelers now speak of it as a marvel, a mountain carved by man. No one in Kemet has ever seen anything like it. Some even say it might reach the heavens if it were 1 step taller. You are Djoser, Pharaoh of the 3rd dynasty. But lately, your name has become less important than your title. He of the pyramid. It sounds powerful, eternal, but you know what it has cost. Your treasury is stretched thin. The construction has diverted grain stores and labor away from other projects. Temples wait for refurbishing. Irrigation canals have gone without repairs. The scribes report rising frustration in the Delta. Priests in Heliopolis quietly wonder whether your focus on stone monuments distracts from the proper worship of Ra. And yet, you cannot stop. You've created something new, something that has never existed before. To abandon it now would be to admit the gods were not speaking to you after all, that Imhotep's vision was a lie, that you were not destined to be remembered, and for a pharaoh, what is worse than being forgotten? You visit the inner chambers now more often than before. The corridors are narrow, lined with polished limestone. The ceilings feel close, and the flickering of oil lamps casts strange, dancing shadows on the carved walls. Here, deep within the belly of your pyramid, lies the sarcophagus chamber not yet used, not yet sealed. You are building your own death. It is a strange thing to watch. Your tomb being prepared. You see the offering niches being carved, the false doors being polished. Hieroglyphs record your names and titles over and over again, not because anyone will read them, but because in the ancient language, repetition is power. The more your name is written, the harder it will be for you to fade. You wonder if the next pharaoh will continue the tradition, or will he fear what you've created and return to humble mastabas? Will the gods approve, or will they punish your ambition? You don't know, but you know you're not building this for your body. You're building it for your car, your essence, the part of you that will still need sustenance in the afterlife. Food, offerings, incense, chants, rituals. Without them, the afterlife is a desert. With them, a garden of reeds. You hope your descendants remember to feed your ghost. Imhotep visits you that evening. He is older now. His face is worn, eyes a bit slower, but his mind is still sharp. You sit with him beneath the stars on the roof of the palace. No guards, just two men who have reshaped the desert together. He tells you of new ideas, of underground tombs that might branch like catacombs, of temples carved into rock faces, of aligning buildings to the solstice. He speaks not with pride, but curiosity, as if architecture were a form of prayer. You ask him what he thinks the gods make of your work. He smiles. If the gods are eternal, they will understand your desire to be remembered, he says. If they are not, then you've already won. A week later, a shipment of casing stones from Tura arrives, damaged. The Nile flood delayed transport, and some blocks cracked in the sun. Replacing them will take time. Workers are exhausted. The overseers request permission to slow the pace. You agree, not because you're merciful, but because you've begun to feel time in a different way. Each day is a smaller portion of your rule. Your joints ache more often. You sleep less. You spend more time in silence, listening to the wind across the courtyard stones. The priests have started rehearsing your funerary rites. They think you do not know, but you do, don't you know? One day you travel to Saqqara alone, as alone as a pharaoh can be, surrounded by guards at a distance. You walk slowly up the ascending steps of the pyramid. The sun is low. You look out. Over the necropolis, there are rows of mastabas belonging to nobles, priests, and officials who served before you, flat and forgettable. And then there is this dot, this pyramid, this mountain. You close your eyes and try to picture the afterlife, the field of reeds, the weighing of your heart. You wonder whether all this, the stone, the rituals, the offerings, is enough to secure your place beside the gods. or whether your fate will be decided not by what you built, but by what kind of king you were. You think of the Namak you spared, the granaries you filled, the priests you neglected, the temples that waited, the balance you tried and often failed to maintain. At the principle of order and balance was always heavier than any stone you placed in the pyramid. That night you write a decree. It is short and sealed with your ring. It orders the repair of a neglected temple in the delta, not because the gods need bricks, but because the people need faith. You leave no instruction about how you wish to be remembered. You realize it's not yours to decide, but one question lingers as you sleep. When the stone erodes and the names are worn away, will memory remain? Or is even a pyramid no match for time? You awaken in darkness, not the comfortable dimness of pre-dawn, but the full, silent black of a sealed room underground. The air is dry, heavy. There is no breeze, no birdsong, no whisper of sandals over polished stone, only silence. But you are not afraid, because this is exactly how it was meant to be. You are Joseph, Pharaoh, son of Ra, he of the pyramid, and you have died. The burial was as precise as it was grand. The high priests recited the proper spells. You remember dimly being carried down the long descending passage into the tomb beneath your step pyramid. The corridor lined with limestone blocks, the walls smooth and silent. The chambers prepared for every possible need your soul might have in the afterlife. Jars filled with oils and wine, wooden chests stuffed with linen, miniature servants carved from faience, placed beside loaves of bread, baskets of fish, bundles of reeds, a lifetime of goods for a journey no one returns from. Above you now, thousands of tons of limestone press silently on your resting place. You are deeper in the earth than any king. Before you, your tomb is cold, sealed, and silent, but it is not forgotten. Imhotep is gone now. His body lies in a tomb nearby, but his name is whispered still by builders, scribes, and physicians alike. Some say he healed a city once struck by disease. Others believe he spoke with gods. A few now call him a god himself. Strange how memory works. You were the king, but it is the builder they deify. Still, you are not jealous. You had your place. In the sun, you had your name carved in every chamber of this pyramid. Josenet Jeriket, the divine body. A king, yes, but now just a memory in stone. Years pass, then decades. The world above your tomb changes. Another pharaoh takes the throne, and then another. They build taller pyramids, steeper, grander. They refine what you and Imhotep began. The Red Pyramid, the Bent Pyramid, then Giza, even more ambitious, more aligned with the stars, more perfectly engineered. Your step pyramid becomes an artifact of a past style, still honored but no longer. A marvel, it becomes the first, the prototype, the ancestor, and in that it becomes eternal in a different way. Centuries pass, dynasties rise and crumble, famine returns, the Nile shifts its flow, invasions come, priests rewrite names on temples, new gods arrive, foreign kings sit on Egypt's throne. They dig, they repurpose, they desecrate, but your pyramid still stands. The desert sands try to bury it, but it endures. It watches time itself, wash past like the floodwaters of the Nile. It is cracked, weathered, scarred, but still it rises. Still it tells your story, even if no one remembers all the details. Thousands of years later, men in strange clothing, boots instead of sandals, come to your pyramid. They carry scrolls, not made of papyrus, but bound in cloth. They speak a language no Egyptian priest would understand. They marvel at your stonework. They sketch, they dig, they speculate. They do not know your voice, but they write your name, Djoser. Sometimes they spell it wrong. Sometimes they call you the first pyramid builder. Other times, they say you were just a copy of older kings. But always, your pyramid stands behind their guesses, quiet, solid, unmoving. And now, you are no longer a pharaoh. You are something else, a presence, a whisper in the corridor, a name in a book, a statue in a museum. But your pyramid still reaches into the sky, step by step, as if forever climbing toward something no longer reachable. Was it worth it? The effort, the grain, the sweat of 10,000 men, the toll on your people, the silence of this chamber? You will never know the answer. That is the weight of legacy. You cannot see it. You can only hope you touched it. And as the final grains of sand shift in the wind above your monument, as tourists snap photographs centuries later, as your face is reconstructed by archaeologists on computer screens, one question still floats unanswered. Did building eternity bring you peace? Did it only prove how temporary all things truly are? You wake up to water, not the gentle trickle of a garden fountain, or the measured pouring of cool jugs into clay basins. No, you wake up to rushing, churning, unrelenting water. It surrounds your palace. It seeps through the clay brick thresholds of storehouses. It pulls at the reeds near the sacred pool. You are barefoot, standing at the edge of your own court, and you can already smell the rising silt. That you are Pharaoh. But the Nile is king today. It is the 18th day of Akit, the first season of the Egyptian calendar, the season of inundation. Every year the Nile floods. It is no accident. It is the rhythm of life, the blessing of Hopi, the god of the river's bounty. In a good year, the flood brings dark, rich silt across your fields. It waters the barley, nourishes the onions, and renews the land. The people feast, granaries overflow, offerings pour into temples. The priests bless your name in lotus and incense. But this year is not a good year. This year, the flood has not stopped. Your advisors, the scribes, and temple watchers warned you. The nilometer readings at Elephantine were higher than expected. The black lines on the stone steps rose too quickly. The priests tried more incense, more songs. They offered honey and milk to Hopi. But the river continued to swell. Now, as you sit beneath the open colonnade of your flooded court, the air is thick with the smell of rot. Baskets of grain have been ruined. The water presses against the lower walls of the palace. Farmers have arrived from the outskirts, barefoot and soaked, begging for direction. You are Pharaoh, the divine intermediary. You are supposed to command. Balance mat. But how does one argue with a river? In the hall of scribes, maps are unrolled across a wet table. Papyrus sheets curl at the edges, ink bleeding. You study the layout of your kingdom. Fields, drowned. Irrigation canals, reversed. Temples, half-dash submerged. You send runners north and south to Thebes, to Abydos, to Mendes. Messages etched into clay tablets. Measure the flood, report damages, send surplus. But you already know the answers. There is no surplus. The flood has broken not just banks, but the fragile equilibrium of Egypt itself. You walk the streets of the capital. The people make way for you. but not with reverence. With uncertainty, children wade through alleyways. Old women perch on rooftop ladders, holding goats above the water. A priest chants near a flooded shrine. The statue of Osiris is half submerged. Even the gods look tired. You pass a field where grain once stood. Now it is a muddy swamp. A laborer recognizes you and falls to his knees in the wet silt. "My king," he says, "we have nothing." You look at him. You want to promise something. But what? You cannot command the river to recede. You cannot make the sky burn the water away. So you nod and walk on. That night you hold council. The high priest suggests an atonement ritual. A sacred cow slaughtered beneath the stars to show the gods your humility. Another priest suggests a festival of Happier, procession on boats, carrying lotus petals and palm branches. A scribe whispers that perhaps the people have forgotten their piety. You ask for practical answers. The granaries, they say, can last another 40 days if rations are halved, if animals are cold, if nobles accept less in taxes. It is a long list of ifs. But you're Pharaoh. You're used to balancing impossibilities. You order it done. Days pass. You relocate families to higher ground. Old temple platform above the floodplain. You watch as nobles protest the ration cuts, but you do not flinch. You stand at the flooded gates of the palace daily, offering a calm face. You visit the boatmen, whose small reed vessels now act as ferries. You speak with them directly, ask them about the current. They tell you the river smells wrong, too much rot, too little clarity. They fear disease. They fear disease. You nod again, begin to quietly instruct the priests to purify the water sources with natron and herbal mixtures. You consult the House of Life for remedies. Your mother once told you that leadership is not about commanding, it's about listening. When the gods go silent, and the gods are silent now, one night the flood reaches its peak. The stars are hidden behind thick clouds. The usual songs from the temples are missing. There is only the sound of water licking against the stone. You climb to the top of the palace tower. From here, the capital looks like a river, delta's scattered roofs poking above black water. The fields beyond are lakes. The roads are gone. You close your eyes and picture the years ahead. No harvest, no trade, revolt. And yet, you also know that the Nile always recedes. Always. The question is not if. It's when and what will remain when it does. You open your eyes. Below, in the courtyard, a small flame flickers. A child has lit a lamp and placed it on a floating reed. Mat, setting it adrift like a prayer. The flame bobs, dips, but does not go out. You watch it until it disappears, and you wonder if Pharaoh is the shepherd of the people. Then who shepherds the shepherd when the land itself becomes water? The morning begins not with sunlight, but with shouting. You step out into the open court, and your guards are already positioned in a half circle, blocking a crowd of desperate citizens. Their linen robes cling to their soaked bodies, and their voices rise in complaint, layered with fear and pleading. You don't need to hear the words to understand. The granary has been breached by midday. You're standing ankle-deep in muck inside the largest storehouse of Memphis. It once held over 4,000 bushels of barley, dried carefully, layered in woven baskets, sealed with clay. Now it's a brown slurry. The sacks have rotted through. Rats scurry over the ledges, and the stench is heavy, fermented. A disaster within. A disaster The granary was the kingdom's heart during a flood insurance. But someone forgot the drainage channel. Or perhaps it was blocked. Perhaps no one had ever imagined the flood would rise this high. Your vizier tries to offer excuses, but you silence him with a look. This isn't the time for blame. This is the time for bread. You order a redistribution of remaining reserves from temple granaries. Some priests resist these, are sacred tithes. They say, offerings to the gods, not the people. You remind them, quietly but firmly, that the gods do not eat bread. The people do. Temples will share their grain, or they will be remembered in stories as those who watched Egypt starve. Most comply, reluctantly. As days pass, you walk the flooded edges of Memphis more often. You notice how quickly people adapt, even in despair. Rafts made from amphorae, rope bridges strung between rooftops, children catching fish in pots. One family has repurposed a broken statue of Anubis as a makeshift raft. A man rows it with a temple torch. You don't stop them. There is no sacrilege in survival. Still, tension simmers. At the temple of Ptah, a minor riot breaks out. People heard that more food was hidden there. Stones are thrown. A priest is struck. You arrive before your soldiers do. The people quiet when they see you. Wet, tired, but upright. You speak not like a god, but like a farmer. You talk of the time the Nile once failed to flood at all. How that, too, was nearly the end of Egypt. But the people endured because they worked together. You tell them this flood is not punishment. It is the Nile, overflowing with memory and grief. They listen, not because your words are divine, but because you're standing in the same mud they are. Still, your mind is heavy. The logistics are relentless. You call upon your knowledge of storage, salt-preserved fish, dried onions, sour beer for hydration. You order granaries to store dried papyrus and water jars in higher places. You summon builders to create raised walkways to protect sacred texts from ruin. Temple libraries are moved to upper chambers. You oversee it yourself, even as courtiers tell you this is beneath you. You tell them what is beneath the Pharaoh is sometimes what holds him up. But the strain begins to show. In the outer nomes, reports arrive of local lords refusing to send grain. They claim they need it for their own people. You know what this means? Fracture. The fragile unity of Upper and Lower Egypt cannot endure long without centralized control. You remember how the first intermediate period began disunity. After famine, a pharaoh's power reduced to a city block. You refuse to let that happen again. You send messengers with not just orders, but envoys bearing food and supplies. Not demands, solidarity. Some governors respond, others don't. You make note of their names, not for vengeance, but for what must come later. A week later, the flood reaches its shoulder, the point at which it finally stops rising. The priests at Elephantine confirm it. There is no more upward motion. The river has crested. The relief is not joy. It is exhaustion. You sit quietly that night in the shadow of your half-submerged palace. Water laps at the columns. The stars finally return. For the first time in weeks, you sleep deeply. When you wake, the wind smells different, not of rot, not of mildew, but of dry reed and earth. The waters have begun to fall, slowly, silently, 1 inch at a time. The Nile retreats like a tired animal. Returning to its den, it will take weeks, maybe months, for the land to reveal itself again. And when it does, what will you find? Destroyed fields, shattered roads, temples in need of rebuilding, a people who have learned how fragile divine order really is. You return to the temple of Hopi. The statues are cleaned. Offerings are lit. You kneel not as Pharaoh, but as someone who has learned the truth every farmer already knows. The river gives, the river takes, and survival is not a gift from the gods. It is a quiet, exhausting act of will. But one final thought clings to you as you walk the newly drying roads of Memphis. If the Nile can betray you once, how do you ever trust it again? The flood receded. Slowly, not with drama or finality, no crash, no rush, just a daily retreat, like a secret being unspoken. Inch by inch, the land reappears. First, the tops of barley stalks. Then, the pathways between villages. Then, the broken thresholds of homes. And finally, the bones of what the water buried. You ride through the southern fields in a shallow hold. Bark, the waters are low enough now that oars scrape bottom. The oarsmen grunt, pushing over what used to be road. Your robes are damp at the hem, but you no longer notice. You've become part of this mud-colored world. All around you, farmers return to their land. They prod the soil with sticks, judging its readiness. They patch roofs, sweep mud from shrines, lift jars out of riverbed cracks. Their work is not triumphant. It is grim, methodical, slow, but it is work, and work means hope. You visit a village where the floodwaters had risen to the rooftops. You remember their cries. You remember a boy handing you a basket of spoiled fish in exchange for a half loaf of temple bread. He is there now, alive, helping dig new irrigation trenches with his father. The father sees you and bows, not deeply, not dramatically, just enough it means more than a chant in a temple. You begin the great accounting. The scribes arrive with long scrolls, lists of deaths, of collapsed granaries, of temple statues swept away. Some numbers are uncertain. Many are rounded up. Too many villagers were cut off to know exactly, but it's enough to understand the scale. You've lost a quarter of the stored grain. Half of the delta's outer fields must be re-sown. Thousands are displaced. Disease has broken out in the western quarters. The temple of Sekhmet is converting its sanctum into a healing hall. You send incense, copper instruments, and wine for sterilization. You tell your vizier, no more temples will rebuild their gold before their roofs. And then, a new problem. As the waters pull back, they leave behind something you'd almost forgotten. Snakes, Nile cobras, displaced from their burrows, now slither through the drying fields. Farmers fear them. One bite kills an hour's. The priests suggest a protective amulet ceremony. You approve it, but add another measure. Trained snake handlers, men from Nubia, known for their skill. You offer them shelter, trade beads, food, and robes. They arrive in 3 days, quiet, efficient. Their presence is a reminder. Egypt is not alone in this world. It never has been. Trade routes open again. Boats return from Byblos, loaded with cedar wood. Traders from Kush arrive with gold, dust, and incense. A caravan from the Sinai arrives late but intact, bearing turquoise and dried meat. You redistribute it not as luxury, but as repair. A dowry for a temple roof, a cedar beam for a fallen house, a bolt of fine linen to replace the torn canopy under which a new priest must now chant. Then comes the real test. Taxation. Your scribes advise you to begin collections at once. The kingdom needs to rebuild its treasury. The army must be paid, roads repaired, priests fed, Officials reinstated. You delay, you speak directly with the scribes. You say, there is no wealth in dead fields. They protest. You persist. You suspend. Tax for one season. Instead, you send teams of royal workers into villages not to collect, but to help replant. You send priests to conduct rituals on site, not in lofty temples. You decree that for 1 year, the harvest will belong to the people first, and to the state second. Not everyone agrees, but the people do, and when planting begins again, it is not with bitterness. It is with quiet resolve. In your private chamber, a papyrus scroll lies open. It contains your words, a decree to be etched in stone near the Nilometer at Elephantine. Let it be remembered that in the year of the long flood, the river tested the soul of Egypt, and though it swallowed roads, homes, and bread, it did not swallow the will of its people. This monument honors not the Pharaoh alone, but all who stayed, who rebuilt, and who bent not under water. You pause then beneath it. You add, may the gods remember not how I ruled in comfort, but how I stood in the flood. Your hair is grayer now, your shoulders stooped. You are not the king you were before the flood, but you are more than you were. 2. Because you have ruled not just with authority, but with endurance. And you have learned a quiet truth whispered, by bread and water, by bread and bone. In Egypt, it is not glory that makes a pharaoh eternal. It is survival. The Nile flows still, its waters low, steady, glinting in the sun. And as the temple drums begin their slow rhythm in the distance, you close your eyes and wonder, when the next flood comes, will the pharaoh after you remember what it meant to stand in the water, not above it? You wake to silence in the harbor. No creaking ropes, no shouting merchants, no scent of fish or frankincense drifting from docked ships. Just the faint rustle of papyrus scrolls in the warm morning air. Something is missing. You rise from your chair in the great court of decrees. The Nile glitters beyond the palace walls, but the wooden pylons at the shoreline are empty. You stare across the river, and there are no sails on the horizon, no Babylonian cedar ships, no Nubian riverboats, no Mycenaean grain barges, because you, Pharaoh, the god who speaks, lauded it so. You banned all foreign trade. It had started months ago, when the shipments from Punt arrived late, and then, strange, the frankincense was mixed with bark, the ebony cracked. There were whispers of disease among the sailors. Traders brought news of unrest in Kipanon, and worse breaths began to murmur that foreign gods were seeping into the temples, that impure idols were being smuggled in alongside incense and luxury. You ordered an audit. You discovered corruption. Scribes at the harbor docks had altered tallies. Officials were bribed. Traders were using temple courtyards as hidden stalls. One even claimed to have sold a Cushite charm to a high priest's daughter. And just like that, the law was etched. No ship from foreign land shall enter the port of Egypt. Let our shores be as sealed as our tombs. Now, the economy is a series of ripples. At first, there was calm. A few raised brows, some muttering among the harbor workers. But the merchants adjusted. Domestic markets surged. Village potters began selling more wares. Local oils, once overlooked, filled shelves where Syrian jars once stood. But quickly, gaps emerged. No new copper from Sinai, no timber from Byblos, no incense from Punt, no lapis from Afghanistan. The temple rituals start running short. Priests complain that prayers cannot be properly performed without resin from the southern kingdoms. Architects grow quiet, there's no wood to roof anew. Worse still, scribes report a growing shortage of salt, not for food, for mummification. The dead are waiting to be preserved. You sit in the palace court, head in hand, reading scroll after scroll of resource reports. Your vizier enters. He suggests compromise. Allow one trade route, one trusted partner, perhaps an annual exception. But you refuse, not out of pride but fear. If one foreign ship docks, you say, then 10 will follow, and with them come their gods, their diseases, and their greed. He says nothing, just bows and leaves. You notice he's begun wearing a simpler kilt. Even the palace is running low on fine flax. You walk the markets of Memphis in disguise. No one recognizes you in a plain robe, hair unbraided, without your pectoral. You pass by empty stalls. Fishermen now selling dried fish on clay slates, where once bronze knives glinted. A seller of amulets offers nothing new, just recarved stock. A baker has cut honey with fig paste, and then a voice calls out, imported. Imported, fresh from the delta. You stop, the seller grins, his eyes sharp. His jars claim to hold Syrian oil, but they don't smell right. You reveal yourself. He falls to his knees. You say nothing. You don't punish him. You don't need to. The silence of the market is punishment enough. Back at the palace, you call a council. This time you ask for different voices. Temple scribes, farmers, midwives, even boatmen. You let them speak. What you hear is not rebellion, but fatigue, a boatman says. We built our boats for the sea. Now they rot on land. A midwife says, the ointments we need for births came from Nubia. We have none left. A farmer says, the grain is good, but the plough is worn. No copper to mend it. Even the priest bows his head and says, without resin, our prayers smell of ash. You listen. You say nothing, because you know what they're saying is true. That night, alone in your chamber, you study the stars. The old astronomers say the heavens shift every 1,000 years, that what we call fixed is only slowly drifting. You wonder if your policy, like the stars, is shifting from order to rigidity, from protection to punishment. You think of the old stories of when Egypt welcomed ships from Punt and beyond, of when goods flowed like the Nile, of when pharaohs built temples with foreign hands, but Egyptian hearts. And then you think of your fear, not of goods, but of loss of culture, of purity, of control. You remember your father's tomb being buried with foreign statues. You remember the priest who warned you, a pharaoh must not dilute the Nile. You remember the shame you felt when you saw your people bow to traders as if they were kings. But are you protecting Egypt now, or just isolating it? You wake in the early morning and stand on the palace roof. The Nile moves slowly, its surface reflecting the pale light. A single boat empty drifts downstream. It's old, unused. A trader's skiff, maybe abandoned. And you ask yourself, is a pharaoh still great if no one beyond Egypt knows his name? The days grow hotter, the markets grow quieter. At first, it seems like peace. No foreign tongues at the dockside. No scribes arguing over maritime weights. No taxes to collect from sea merchants. No dispute over which temple receives the cedar from Byblus, which perfume from Crete, or which ingots from Cyprus. Just the daily rhythm of Egypt. Stillness, order, control, but beneath that stillness, you begin to hear something else, emptiness. The first official petition comes from Thebes, a priest of Ammon. Writing with careful neutrality, states that the temple cannot meet its incense quotas for the Opet festival. There is no myrrh, no cinnamon. The stockpile of imported aromatics, once thought endless, has dwindled to dust. Without them, the god's presence cannot be properly summoned. A week later, another letter arrives from Heliopolis. There, astronomer priests report the bronze lenses used for solar alignment have cracked. They ask for new metal to be smelted, but there is no tin, no copper. Egypt has no native supply. Then the royal stonecutters complain. The granite drills were down. No one can replace them. Suddenly, the empire that built pyramids begins to feel ... brittle. Your vizier returns. This time with numbers. Temple attendance is down 12%. Minor revolts have flared in two nomes near the Red Sea coast. The granary reserves are stable but no longer rising. Black market incense has begun flowing north from Kush. Despite patrols, you ask how TE answers. Where laws create gaps, men create ladders. In secret, you begin touring the outer towns. You see makeshift boats returning under cover of night, their hulls stuffed with foreign cloth, bark, dried resin. You see children chewing gum from Nubia. A potter in Amarna fires ceramic beads in Mycenaean patterns, never having seen Mycenae. The culture you tried to seal out is seeping in again, not through ports, but through memory. You banned trade, but you did not ban desire. You return to the palace and meet with the high scribe. You ask him a question. What was Egypt before Punt? He hesitates, then answers, a river and a prayer. You understand, it was Punt that gave Egypt its incense, its gold dust, its ivory. It was trade that fed temples, that gave rise to the very rituals you now defend with isolation. Egypt is not just papyrus and barley, it is lapis, obsidian, linen, 1,000 foreign fingerprints, pressed into local clay. But the dilemma remains. You banned trade to protect the soul of Egypt. But what is the soul of Egypt without breath? You call a private council, a small one, your vizier, to priests. One old boat captain. You ask them not how to restart trade, but how to control it differently. The boat captain laughs softly. Pharaoh, he says, the river cannot be stopped, but it can be steered. A new idea begins to form. Not an open floodgate, but a canal narrow, monitored, one port only. One list of approved goods. One temple to receive and redistribute. One priest to bless each ship. A sacred harbor. You would call it the gate of offerings, not a trade hub, but a religious vessel, a spiritual filter for worldly goods. No merchant stalls, no coins exchanged, only tribute acknowledged, taxed, cleansed. You draft the decree yourself. Your hands tremble as you dip the reed pen into ink. This is not a reversal, not a surrender. It is a redirection. You write, let it be known, foreign ships may dock under the gaze of the gods. Only offerings of sacred youths shall be accepted. Gold for the tombs, incense for the temples, copper for the sacred tools, and none shall pass except under the hand of Pharaoh. You seal it with wax and the ring of Horus. The silence breaks, silence breaks. When the first ship from Punt arrives weeks later, it does not carry gold bowls or strange toys. It carries 6 amphorae of myrrh, a bundle of frankincense, a small chest of powdered cinnabar. One priest steps forward and blesses it before unloading. The sailors never step ashore. People gather to watch. No shouting, no bargaining, just reverence. And yet, days later, a child in Memphis smells the incense and asks her mother, "What is that scent?" The mother answers, "That is the breath of the gods." But you know the truth. That is the scent of trade, filtered, sanctified, controlled. Not because Egypt is afraid, but because it has remembered how to breathe. Still, you wonder, if you seal every gate, do you preserve the soul of Egypt or slowly suffocate it? It's been 3 years since you sealed Egypt's borders. 3 years of still harbors, of incense controlled like gold, of copper counted like sacred offerings, of a kingdom no longer a crossroads, but a fortress of reeds and stone. At first, the silence brought calm, then suspicion, then discomfort. And now, something stranger, forgetting. You sit alone in the temple of Thoth. Describe God. Scrolls are stacked around you, import ledgers, customs reports, ancient trade records. You read a name, Byblos. You pause. You try to recall the scent of its cedar, the exact hue of its dye, the chants its sailors sang as they tied rope to the pylons of Memphis harbor. You can't remember, you realize. Neither can the scribes born after the ban. A culture sealed too tightly begins to ferment, and when it does, what emerges is not preservation, it is distortion in the palace. The copper tools are failing. Even temple craftsmen admit the sacred blades used for embalming are dull. No tin to create bronze. The once gleaming surgical instruments are now reused beyond their years. More and more deaths go unpreserved. Corpses left to rot, rituals skipped, tombs sealed without scent or ceremony. You receive another scroll from the house of life. We lack resin. We lack salts. We lack time. The priests say nothing aloud, but their silence is louder than a crowd's cry. You order another council, this time a broader one. Scribes, builders, priests, traders, even farmers from the gnomes. They sit around a wide alabaster table, unfamiliar, with each other's presence to many years of roles, kept apart by ritual and law. You ask a single question: has the ban made Egypt stronger? They don't answer at first, until one old Manon, overseer of embalmers, speaks. It made us still, not strong. You nod, and speak quietly. Stillness becomes rot in time. You reflect on your earliest days of rule, when you believed purity was strength, that every foreign god, every Phoenician coin, every carved lapis from Bactria was a crack in the dam. But now you understand. Egypt does not dissolve by contact. It adapts. It filters. It absorbs. It always has. The pyramid was not built of one kind of stone. The tomb was never stocked with only Egyptian goods. Even Makgadis of Balanscarid, a feather not found along the Nile. And so you reversed the law, not with fanfare, not with apology, but with a ceremony. At dawn, beneath the pylons of Memphis, you walk barefoot to the shore. A small ship from Crete waits, its hull light, its deck silent. It bears gifts, cinnamon, copper, linen. You accept them not as a merchant, but as a guardian, and in return, you offer a single bundle, barley wrapped in linen, soaked in Nile water. Egypt gives. Egypt takes. Egypt breathes. Word spreads across the kingdom. Trade has resumed, but not as before. Now, it is slow, measured, transparent, one dock only. One temple lead review. Every good is logged, weighed, taxed. Every sailor blessed. Every god acknowledged. The old merchants return with their boats worn, sun-bleached but smiling. The market fills with smells not known for years: cedar, fish oil, honey-soaked almond. Children crowd to see coins from distant lands. Artists sketch foreign faces on broken pottery. The temples resume their full rites. Incense trails once again swirl like spirits above the altars. Egypt breathes, years later. A new generation rises. They grow up knowing trade, but knowing it differently. Not as chaos, but as rhythm. Not as danger, but as balance. Not as surrender, but as choice. And when you walk among them older, grayer, softer, they still bow. Not because you banned the world, but because, in time, you welcomed it back. You return once more to the temple of Thoth. You write the final decree of your reign. Let the gates of Egypt be doors, not walls. Let every offering be weighed by wisdom. And let Pharaoh be not the shield, but the balance. You seal the scroll, and as the ink dries, you ask yourself, what if the strength of Egypt was never in keeping the world out, but in choosing what to let in? You wake to the sound of chisels, not temple bells, not priestly chants, not the gentle rustle of linen as offerings are placed, but hard, hurried, chiseling metal on stone, echoing deep through the valley of the kings. You are Pharaoh, and the dead no longer rest. At first, you think it's a dream, that the sound is part of the darkness beneath your closed eyelids. But then, the vizier arrives, his face pale despite the sun's relentless burn. He kneels, breath shallow, and speaks what no subject should ever have to say. Your Majesty, another tomb has been emptied. Your spine stiffens, not because you are surprised, but because you are not. The tombs are supposed to be sacred, not just burial places, but houses of eternity. They are carved by the best artisans, painted with scenes of divine rebirth, guarded by curses and stone doors and long, winding tunnels meant to confuse the impure. They are filled with food, tools, amulets, spells, and treasure and gold. And now, emptied, you summon your royal inspector. He brings you wax-sealed scrolls from the western cliffs. Tomb of Sobkamsaf, broken into. Tomb of Jutanakt, desecrated. Tomb of a high priest of Ammon, completely stripped. Each entry reads the same way. Sarcophagus pried, linen shredded, goods stolen, guards bribed or absent. One scroll describes a particularly vile scene, a mummy half-burned, unwrapped, tossed like refuse in the desert wind. Even the curse carvings had been chipped off the wall. The gods have not been feared, not for a long time. You meet in the Hall of Judgment, flanked by stone pillars and flickering oil lamps. Around you sit scribes, priests, and palace guards. They speak in careful tones. One priest suggests tighter curses, longer spells, more protective amulets. Another recommends harsher punishment, impalement for robbers, exile for guards. But the temple treasurer speaks bluntly, if the dead are not safe, Pharaoh, then what hope have the living? You order an audit of every royal tomb built in the last 5 dynasties. The results are shocking. Half are sealed but empty. The third were never fully stocked in the first place. Treasures delayed, never delivered. You now suspect some theft began before the king was even buried. The rot is not new, it is systemic. You decide to go in person to the valley to Thebes, not in procession, but in disguise. A small retinue, quiet, no gold, no banners. Just you, robes plain, hood drawn. You walk the winding canyon paths where your ancestors once dreamed of eternal stillness. Instead, you find shattered pottery, footprints in places where no one should tread. One tomb's limestone door has been blackened with smoke. Another sealed tightly, but with a strange sulphurous smell inside. You ask the local guard how often he patrols. He hesitates, then bows. Only when there is silver to be paid, Majesty. You do not punish him, because you know the fault is higher. Back in your palace chamber, you sit before a statue of Anubis. You ask a question aloud. What happens when the dead no longer fear the jackal? No one answers, but in your heart, you already know. You summon your royal builder. You ask him for something new, not another tomb, not another labyrinth of carved sandstone and decorative spells, but a vault, underground, unmarked, guarded, not by gold, but by obscurity. No murals, no inscriptions, no hints, only the body, the linen, the bare essentials of eternity. You will not announce it. You will not inscribe it. You will not even place it under your name, because true eternity now demands invisibility. The builder nods. He understands, and so a hidden chamber begins, somewhere beneath the sand dug by night, recorded in no scroll, witnessed only by silence. But even as you attempt to rewrite the rituals of death, you face a harder question. What has become of Egyptif? Even the dead are no longer sacred. You rise before dawn now, not for ceremony, not for prayers, but to read confession scrolls, long lists of names etched in trembling handwriting, sealed with the mark of guilt. Captured robbers, questioned guards, scribes accused of false inventories. The most recent scroll begins with a sentence that makes your hands freeze. I was born to a tombkeeper and died as a thief. It is not a metaphor. The scribe who wrote this oversaw the preparation of 6 noble burials. He had memorized the layout of each passage, the weight of every offering, the times the guards rotated. Then one day, as famine struck, his son fell ill. The temple turned him away. So he returned to the tomb not to pray, but to take. He stole a single gold ring from a noble's hand. Then he came back the next week for a necklace, and the week after for the entire coffin. You stare at the confession for a long time. It ends without defiance. There was no curse. There was only silence. You gather your high court for what will become known as the Great Inquest of Tombs. Not a spectacle, but a reckoning. 72 names are read aloud in the court of mat scribes, guards, masons, even a temple priest. Most confess immediately, not because they are caught, but because they are exhausted. One woman, a linen weaver from Deir el-Medina, says softly, "We stopped believing the dead would protect us, so we protected ourselves." Another says, "There is no gold left among the living, only among the dead." You do not order executions. Instead, you begin something Egypt has never seen, a registry of the dead. Each tomb is catalogued anew, its condition, its contents, its guards, its priests. For every sealed door, a duplicate record is carved on stone and stored deep inside the temple of Thoth. For every burial, 2 inspections must be signed by separate officials, one religious, one royal. You separate the rights of eternity from the management of wealth, because gold, you realize, does not ensure immortality. It invites forgetting. You send a new decree to the artisans of Deir el-Medina. No more golden masks. No more alabaster statues. No more ornate ushabti with lapis inlays. From now on, the wealthy may build tombs, but the state must approve their contents. Decorative opulence is allowed, but all valuables must be made from clay, wood, or painted stone. Real gold, only with Pharaoh's seal, only for gods. The nobles protest. They claim this strips dignity from the dead, but you counter. Dignity is not measured in glitter. You show them the mummy of a priest whose tomb was stripped and burned, his wrappings half-charred, his jaw broken. You show them the empty sarcophagus of a prince whose mask was melted into rings. You ask, is this the glory you buried him for? They fall silent, but not everyone agrees. Rumors grow in the northern gnomes. A cult calling itself the True Guardians begins to preach that the Pharaoh has insulted the gods by stripping their gifts, that this new policy is a rejection of the ancient order, that without gold, the gods will abandon Egypt. You send envoys to investigate. They find a hidden tomb near Abadosnut, looted but false, filled with wooden replicas, clay-painted jewels, fake papyrus spells, a decoy tomb built to draw away thieves from a real burial site. You stare at the report, and for the first time, you smile. Even among death, a new kind of intelligence is growing. Months later, you meet with your royal builder again. He reports that the invisible tomb you commissioned is nearly complete. You ask, will it last? He shrugs. All things fade, Pharaoh, but this one has no gold, no map, no name, no temptation. Perhaps that will be enough. You visit it in secret, just once, a hollow chamber deep beneath a dune. No murals, just stone and silence. You walk its length slowly, and for the first time, you imagine not your death but your rest, not your legacy but your peace back in your chamber. You make one final amendment to the burial laws, a simple line: let the dead be remembered, not robbed, and let the living worship not gold but memory. But you still wonder, if gold no longer guards the dead, will memory be enough to guard the truth? The tombs are quiet now, not because they are undisturbed. Many still lie broken, their treasures gone, their guardians lost, but because the noise has shifted from chisels and hammers to whispers. You sit in your private library, a narrow, dim chamber behind the temple of Thoth. There are no guards posted here, no gilded doors, just rows of scrolls, dusty, cracked, smudged. Some are centuries old, others were written last week. All of them contained the same thing: records of forgetting. The registry of the dead now fills entire rooms of your palace. Every tomb surveyed, every seal checked, every offering recorded and double-dash checked. It has become, in a strange way, a second kingdom, a kingdom of documentation. Scrolls as sarcophagi, ink as stone, names preserved not in gold but bureaucracy. And still, it's not enough, because scrolls can be altered, seals can be copied, and men, especially hungry ones, can lie. The robbers have not disappeared. They've simply grown more careful, quieter, smarter. One evening, a report arrives by secret courier. You break the seal and read: a tomb discovered in the cliffs north of Aswan, perfectly sealed, undisturbed. But when opened, empty, no body, no coffin, just prayers carved into stone, and one sentence on the inner wall: to bury a thing is not to protect it, only to hide it. You sit in silence for a long time, then whisper, even the living are learning how to die. You gather your council one last time. Your voice is low, even you tell them, we can no longer treat death as theater. It has become arithmetic. The priests resist. They speak of sacred cycles, of rebirth, of the great voyage through the underworld. They say the tomb is not a container, is a portal. You nod, then reply, what is a portal when the soul never gets to leave? You make one final change. You declare the tomb act of anonymity. From now on, all common burials, no inscriptions, no names, no titles, no family trees. Just quiet graves, sunken and unmarked, outside the valley. The elite still resist, but some begin to see the logic. Anonymity is no longer dishonor, it is armor. Soon, whispers become a different kind of rumor, that the Pharaoh himself may already be buried, that he built his tomb before his own reign began, that it lies somewhere not in Thebes, not in the Valley of Kings, but under a worker's village, or inside a collapsed quarry, or beneath the temple floor itself. These whispers grow not because they are true, but because the truth is undiscoverable, and that, at last, feels like protection. Years pass, fewer tombs are looted now, not because guards are better, but because there's less to take. Wood replaces gold, stone replaces ivory, clay replaces lapis, memory replaces monument. And then, one day, your royal embalmer approaches you quietly. He bows and says, "Majesty, it is time to plan your resting." You nod, but you offer no instruction, because you already planned it. Years ago, the tomb is done, hidden, known only to one. He will not speak, and when he dies, it will vanish with him. No map, no statue, no shrine, just stillness in your final days. You walk the colonnades of the Temple of Anubis. Children run between the pillars. One stops, looks at you, and asks, "Pharaoh, do you want to be remembered?" You pause and answer, "I want Egypt to rest." When you are gone, the records will not be sealed in gold. They will be sealed in silence. A line in a scroll, a gap in the registry, a whisper in a market, and yet, 1,000 years from now, a worker may stumble across a clay figurine, crude, unpainted, buried with care. He will pick it up and say, "Someone loved this. Someone believed it mattered." And in that moment, you will be remembered not as a pharaoh of gold, but as a pharaoh of quiet, a king who tried to give back to the dead what the living had stolen. You wake before the sun. The palace is quiet, but not peacefully so. No smell of fresh barley bread from the royal kitchens, no grain porridge bubbling on the coals, no baskets carried through the servants' hallways, overflowing with wheat from the Nile's black earth. Instead, the air smells thin like ash, dry. Tense. Today is not a feast day. Today is a famine. You sit beneath a fan woven from dried palm leaves. Your vizier stands before you with the monthly census scroll. He doesn't speak at first, then finally, "The lower granaries are empty, Majesty." You already knew, but now it is official. The Nile did not flood last season. Not high enough, not long enough. The black silt was weak, the crops thin and yellow. The irrigation trenches crumbled early. The planting was rushed. The harvest rushed again, and then rats, locusts, heat, then the silence of grinding stones that had nothing left to grind. You ask how many granaries still hold wheat. The vizier lifts another scroll. 3 remain. 3. In a kingdom that spans more than 600 miles of river, each granary guarded now, not by scribes, but soldiers. Each day, 100 people gather outside their gates, bowls in hand. Some chant, some pray, some scream. None of them are fed, because the bread is gone. You summon the overseer of the fields. He arrives sweating, brow streaked with dirt despite his fine robe. He bows, but not deeply. He is tired. You ask him how much food is left in the Westegni Nomis. He looks you in the eyes and answers plainly, enough to bury our dead majesty, not to feed them. Outside Memphis, a baker is arrested. He had been cutting barley flour with crushed reed and sand, selling it as bread to peasants. For died internal bleeding, the man weeps as he's dragged through the streets. But no one curses him, because even a lie that looks like bread is still closer to hope than nothing at all. The temples remain full for now, each shrine to Osiris, and Isis and Ra keep sacred offerings. Wheat, wine, dates, oil, you consider taking it. Your priests protest, they say. The gods must eat before men. You ask quietly, and if all men die, who will feed the gods? They do not answer. You send spies to the merchant class. Many have hidden caches, stockpiled grain, sealed in clay jars, buried in cellars and sand. You threaten them with exile. Some comply, others vanish. You pass a new law. No grain may be kept in private stores. All wheat is property of the crown. It doesn't stop the hoarding, it just pushes it deeper. Now the smell of bread in a neighborhood is a kind of crime. You order emergency rations to be baked, hard loaves, unleavened, no honey, no spice. You personally deliver them to families in the temple. Courtyards, the children stare. They've never seen Pharaoh this close. One mother hands you her son's half-eaten loaf. She says, let him believe it came from you. You give her. Yours he eats both, one crumb at a time. But generosity alone will not save the kingdom. You call your mapmaker. You look beyond Egypt to Canaan, to Cyprus. You ask, who among them still has wheat? He answers, all of them, Majesty, and they know you are hungry. The price will be steep. You consider the treasury. There is still gold in the temples, still turquoise in the royal stores, still ivory carvings and painted linen robes. But to trade these means breaking the sacred reserve, the wealth meant for the afterlife. You hesitate, but then remember, if Egypt dies now, the afterlife will be empty anyway. You issue the order. A delegation is prepared. Ships are filled with statues, spices, jewels. They sail north under banners of the Pharaoh's hunger. You do not disguise the message. You let the world see. Egypt not as divine, but as desperate, because only desperation can move stubborn hearts. Back in the capital, a teacher writes a new school chant. The bread will come. The bread will come. We drink the Nile and wait for sun. We share the bowl. We close our eyes and dream of wheat that never dies. The children sing it at dusk, some with tears in their eyes, some with hollow bellies, some with hope. And as the wind rises through the palace colonnades that night, you whisper to yourself, when the bread returns, will Egypt still remember what it means to share it? The grain ships have not yet returned. You check the horizon each morning from the palace steps in Memphis. You gaze across the river, lined with fishing boats and red barges searching for the white sails of foreign aid. But there is only sun, only river, only waiting, and your people are growing tired of waiting. In the market districts, fights break out over rumor, a whisper that a noblewoman received barley in secret sparks, a riot near the western granary, a scribe is cornered by a mob. His satchel holds nothing but papyrus scraps, but they tear it apart anyway, hoping for bread. Even your guards no longer sleep in shifts. They stand full time outside the temple food stores, silent, sweating, spears trembling from exhaustion. More than fear, you pass one and hear him mumble, "I used to protect Pharaoh, now I protect crumbs." You call a council of the grain, an emergency meeting of overseers, priests, scribes, merchants. Each brings a tally. The high priest of Ammon, "We can keep the sacred offerings for 2 more festivals." The minister of weighing and measuring, "Our grain silos are 6% full and spoiling fast." The chief merchant, "The Biblians want twice the price in gold. The Cypriots want tin. The Hittites want land. You speak only once, give it to them." Your vizier leans forward, eyes wide, "Land, majesty." You nod, "Dead soil cannot feed Egypt. Let us trade what no longer grows." You begin parceling out border territories, rocky regions in the north and far south, long unused but symbolically valuable. The nobles scream betrayal. They call it weakness, but you call it calculation. Let others grow grain on Egyptian soil as long as Egypt eats. Days pass, the ships still do not return, and the famine deepens. You order the temples opened. The priests resist, but the people no longer care. They break the seals, they climb the steps, they carry away baskets of stored wheat once meant for the gods. An old woman, barefoot, holding a single bundle of barley, turns to the high altar of Ammon and mutters, "He already has eternity. Let me have one more day." You do not punish her. Instead, you begin the bread oath. Every noble family must present a portion of their stored grain publicly. At the temple square at sunrise. With witnesses. The people gather to watch. Some nobles comply. Others try to hide their stores in clay pots behind servant walls. But the scent of flour is easy to trace. Your guards find every hiding place. You say only one thing to the guilty. When Egypt starves, the gods cannot hear your prayers. Through gold. One day, a child collapses at the palace gate, skin pale, ribs visible. He's too weak to cry. Your steward moves to lift him, but you stop him. You lift the boy yourself, carry him to the palace. Kitchens. Sit beside him as he eats his first real bread in days. He does not speak, but when he is finished, he simply rests his head on your knee and sleeps. Word spreads. Pharaoh is feeding the sick, and not with gold, but with his bowl. From that day on, it becomes ritual. Each sunrise, you sit at the courtyard steps with a large clay bowl, filled not with royal portions, but with what remains: lentils, sour barley, even water-soaked reeds. You eat it with your people. No servants, no distance, and though it feeds few, it nourishes trust. Then, at last, after 63 days, without a single grain ship, your horizon shifts. A boy on the palace roof shouts, "White sails, dozens." Your vizier runs barefoot to the gate. You rise slowly. You already knew. The bread convoy has returned. Biblian wheat, Cypriot barley, Mycenaean flour in sealed amphorae. The ships dock, the people weep. Some faint from hunger and joy. You kneel at the harbor edge and touch the first sack of grain with your fingers. It's coarse, warm, real. And suddenly the Nile feels full again, not with water, but life. But that night, in the silence of your chamber, you don't celebrate. Instead, you ask yourself, when the hunger fades, will the selfishness return? The grain convoy saved Egypt, but it didn't save everything. As the flour-filled jars were rolled into the granaries, you noticed something strange. No cheering, just silence. No songs, just tears. The people were not celebrating. They were relieved, because when famine is long, even joy becomes unfamiliar. You ordered the rations, distributed fairly, priests, merchants, farmers all given equal measure. Temples were fed, but no more than households. Even the granary scribes received only what their families could carry. This time, you watched every scale. No cheating, no cuts for friends, no bribes accepted in secret, no hidden sacks sealed beneath floorboards. You placed your own name on every ration tablet. This is Pharaoh's share, given not in favor, but in duty. But though bellies grew full again, the kingdom was not the same. Something had cracked. You saw it in the quiet. Families stopped trusting the market stalls. Old women whispered over the bread, as if fearing it might vanish again. Children, even after eating, still clutched crusts in their fists, refusing to sleep until they were sure the next meal was real. The famine had passed, but scarcity had left. Fingerprints. You met with your council again, not in the marble audience chamber. In the warehouse itself, the air smelled of wheat and dust. You asked them, one by one, why did this happen? The answers came in fragments. A priest said, the gods tested us. A merchant said, the nobles hoarded. A farmer said, the land stopped listening. But one boy barefoot, barely old enough to speak, said something no one else had. We forgot how to share. You knelt beside him and said, we will not forget again. That was the moment you decided to change Egypt, not with temples, not with punishments, but with rituals. You declared a new feast day, the festival of the first loaf, each year. After the first harvest, every family, rich or poor, must bake one loaf of bread, not for themselves, not for the gods, but for someone else, a neighbor, a stranger, a priest, a widow. Bread given in silence, no names exchanged, no thanks expected, just loaf to hand. You also created the scroll of the bowl, a living document kept in the house of life. In it, scribes record every act of grain sharing during the famine, every temple that opened its doors, every merchant that gave without price, every family that took in others. You do not include names of the greedy. You only remember the ones who fed, because memory is not just record, it is reward. 10 years pass, the famine becomes story, then whisper, then lesson. Children chant the bread song still, though some forget its origins. The clay bowl you once used in the palace steps is now kept in the temple of Thoth, not gilded, not polished, still chipped, but people line up to see it. They touch it, and some even weep, because it wasn't gold that saved Egypt, it was that bowl. You live long enough to see one last bad season. The Nile again recedes. The fields turn thin, but something strange happens this time. There is no panic. People immediately begin baking shared loaves. Temples open their cellars. Before you ask, even the nobles, once stingy, bring forward stock without decree. They have learned, they remember. One night, near the end of your reign, a servant brings you a gift, a small clay statue of a boy holding a bowl, crude, unpainted, wrapped in palm leaves. She says, "It's you, Majesty." Not the crown, you, the other one. You place it by your bed, and as you fall asleep you think, I was not Pharaoh of a golden age. I was Pharaoh of the hungry, and that was enough. You wake up with the morning sun filtering through the reeds of your chamber, but something is wrong. You look across the stone courtyard of the palace and notice them not the usual servants, but a group of laborers. Men, women, even children, with shaved heads, hunched shoulders, and quiet mouths. Their ankles are shackled, not to walls but to each other. You are Pharaoh, and you suddenly realize your kingdom runs on chains. For as long as the scrolls remember, Egypt has been built on the backs of others, not just workers, owned. People captured from Nubia, bought from Canaan, traded by Mycenaean. Merchants like tools or cloth. You pass by them every day, grinding grain, carrying bricks, sweeping the halls. Of the gods they do not speak, they do not look up. They are there, but never seen. Until now. You sit in the great hall for morning audience. Your vizier presents a scroll, a list of newly purchased slaves brought in after a border raid near the Sinai. 33 humans, catalogued like cattle. He begins reading their names, ages. Wait, you stop him. How long have we done this? He blinks. Majesty. Since long before your throne was carved. You walk to the temple of Ossa. You ask the high priest, what happens to a soul that dies in chains? He hesitates, then mutters, all souls are equal beyond the veil. But not before it. You leave without another word. That night you cannot sleep. You look at your walls painted with murals of builders, harvesters, boat rowers. You look closer and realize most of them are bound. You call for your royal historian. He arrives with scrolls that stretch back for dynasties. You ask him plainly, was Egypt always a kingdom of slaves? He says nothing at first, then unrolls a faded papyrus. It tells the story of an early pharaoh who ruled during a flood, fields washed out, temples collapsing, people starving. The king freed his laborers to help their own villagers. They came back willingly and built stronger temples. You ask, why did we forget him? He shrugs, perhaps because there was no gold left to bury him. You visit the worker village at Daya el-Medina. It is late. You go without fanfare, no guard, no herald, just robes and sandals. A woman stirs porridge over a fire of crushed date pits. You ask her name, she does not give it. You ask if she is free, she looks down. If I stop working, I stop living. Does that answer Pharaoh? You return to your palace. You stand before the throne, alone, and say aloud, then let Pharaoh begin. The next day you issue the first decree of flesh and sand. No man, woman, or child born within the floodplain of the Nile may be owned. All temple slaves freed, all foreign-born servants reclassified as paid labor. No more sales, no more chains. You allow one generation to transition. No violence, no revenge. But with clarity, Egypt will no longer purchase hands as if they are baskets of grain. The court explodes. Nobles scream. Priests accuse you of sacrilege. Builders warn of collapse. You listen, then respond. If our greatness requires chains, it is not greatness. You commission the scroll of names, a national record not of taxes or tribute, but of freed people. Every name carved in ink, kept not in the palace, but in the temple of Ma. Single quotes, at justice, not power. You inscribe the first name yourself, a girl from Cush. Age 9, given as a gift to the temple. She now becomes a citizen, but it is not easy. Some refuse to comply. You send inspectors to temples, to farms, to noble villas. If they find chains, those chains are melted. If they find branded flesh, those brands are treated. If they find resistance, you do not imprison. You fine, you make injustice expensive and freedom profitable. But still, you wonder, will freedom take root? Or will Egypt quietly reforge the chains when you are gone? Freedom spreads slowly, not like the Nile in flood, rushing over the land, but like water from a cracked, jar dripping, hesitant, deliberate at first. The temples resist your decree. They argue the gods have always been served by slaves. That ritual purity demands hierarchy. That freeing the bound would anger the ancestors. You reply calmly, if the ancestors must eat from chained hands, then their hunger offends the gods more than mine ever could. In Thebes, the high temple of Ammon releases over 200 workers. Some were born into bondage. Others were war captives. One was a mother of 3. She had carried water jugs to the altar every day since. She was 7 when the priest tells her she is free. She doesn't move. She kneels on the ground, hands still reaching for a jug that's no longer required. She whispers, "If I do not carry, who am I?" Freedom, it turns out, is not just release. It's redefinition. To ease the transition, you create the house of relearning. Every newly freed person may attend for 1 season. They are taught skills, reading, counting, weighing grain, planting crops, not just how to serve but how to live as part of Egypt. Some are confused, others laugh, but over time, the house becomes a second kind of temple, a place where those once silent find language. The nobles are furious. Their estates run dry. Their homes fall silent. They must now pay for labor. One prince petitions for exemption, claiming his family line predates even the Nama palette. You meet him in court. He presents a scroll of lineage. You tear it and say, "Age does not excuse rot." Still, you offer compromise. Those who release their slaves willingly may convert former property into paid contracts. 3-year terms, renewable. Wages are low, but fair. Housing is basic, but safe. This too causes whispers. Some say Pharaoh is bargaining with dignity, but you say, freedom without options is just a prettier cage. In Nubia, you take it further. You personally travel there with your retinue, no war banners, no golden chariots, just baskets of wheat, jars of wine, bolts of linen. You meet with the local chiefs, offer treaties, not as conqueror, but as equal. They stare, then speak and name your name without bowing. It is the first time in recorded Egyptian memory a southern chief has done so without punishment. You do not punish, you smile, because this is the Egypt you're building, where respect doesn't depend on chains. Still, rebellions rise. In the Delta, a cluster of nobles attempt to reinstate forced labor by labeling it temple work. You send a group of freed scribes. They audit the temple books. They expose the fraud. And for the first time in Egypt's history, former slaves prosecute their former masters. One woman, a baker's daughter, once owned by a priest, now serves as royal inspector of labor. She wears a plain blue sash, no jewelry, no title scroll. But when she enters a work site, men stop, not from fear, but from something rarer, recognition. Years pass, temples adjust, the pyramids stand, still maintained. Tombs are built, not by captives, but by craftspeople paid to etch into eternity. The scribes call this era Zeptepi Shenet II. Opening, not a new kingdom, but a new kind of kingdom. In your 27th regnal year, an elder from the house of relearning brings you a gift, a lit-and-bound scroll with no gold leaf, on it only names, no gods, no prayers, just names, of every freed person since your decree. It takes 3 full days to read aloud at the end. The elder simply says, "May Egypt never forget them again." You place the scroll in the tomb of Ma, at no coffin, no incense, just light and space, because some memories deserve room to breathe. But as the sun sets across your sandstone, caught that evening, a question lingers in your mind. If the next Pharaoh fears freedom, how long will these chains stay buried? You are old now. The court walks more slowly when you pass. Children no longer run from you, they reach for your hand. You no longer wear the heavy crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, only a plain head wrap. Linen, not gold, because you are no longer just Pharaoh of a kingdom. You are Pharaoh of a promise. It has been 34 years since the decree of flesh and sand. Egypt did not fall. The temples did not collapse. The pyramids did not crack. In fact, the grain stores are more stable than ever, because free people work longer, smarter, with choice, because the one who builds the wall by their own will makes it stronger than any chained hand. You visit the port at Memphis. A man with dark skin and silver in his hair greets you. He once carried bricks to a nobleman's tomb. Now he owns 3 grain barges. He gives you bread, coarse barley and honey, he says. This tastes better than gold. And you believe him. Not all agreed with your laws. Some families left, settled in desert. Outposts tried to preserve the old ways. Their estates are crumbling now. No one will work for them. Not for free. Even the gods seem quieter there, because gods, too, need people who believe in dignity. You write one final decree from this day forth. No body shall be buried beneath a name of ownership. No grave shall carry the word slave. All who live and die in Egypt belong to themselves and to the Nile alone. It is inscribed not on a monument, but on a wall in the house of relearning. Students touch it each morning, a ritual of memory in your final season. You order your tomb to be built, not in the Valley of Kings, not near the pyramids, but in a sunken chamber beneath a school. There are no murals, no riches, only a carved phrase above the sealed door. He unbound Egypt. You insist no cartouche be added, no prayer scroll, just silence. And when the priests protest, you say, "If I am remembered, let it be by someone who is not owned." You die in the middle of a long summer. The Nile is full that year, so are the granaries. Children place flowers outside the house of relearning. They don't chant. They don't wail. They sit quietly beside your tomb and eat bread years later. Foreign kings send emissaries to learn how your empire avoided revolt. They are shown to the scroll of names. They are given a piece of baked clay that once sealed your first decree. They are taken to the homes of men and women who were once branded, and these people say, "We no longer remember Pharaoh as our owner, only as our neighbor." Egypt becomes something different, still powerful, still holy, but now shared not because of gold, not because of conquest, but because one Pharaoh woke up, hand saw the chains, and decided to melt them. You wake to silence, not the peaceful silence of a Nile morning. This silence is heavy, intentional. You glance toward your writing chamber where, each dawn, royal scribes normally gather with fresh scrolls, inkstones, and reports. But the mats are empty, the ink bowls untouched, and your daily docket missing at first. You think it's an oversight, but your steward, pale and sweating, bows deeply and whispers, "They are gone, Majesty, all of them." All 29 royal scribes disappeared. Overnight, no scrolls left behind, only a single piece of linen pinned to the outer column of the Hall of Records. On it, in perfect, measured handwriting, "We write for Pharaoh no longer. You summon your council, they bring more news. The schools of Sais and Heliopolis have closed. Instruction has stopped at the Temple of Thoth. No tax records were updated, no letters dispatched. No prayers copied at the bureaucratic heart of Egypt has stopped beating." You think back, not long ago, these same scribes had been rising in both skill and number. You had expanded their ranks to keep pace with a growing kingdom they had once worshipped. Pharaoh as a god. Now, they vanish like smoke. Your vizier urges immediate punishment. They are not warriors. They are pens and sandals. They must be reminded who sharpens their quills. But something tells you this is not rebellion of spears. It is something older, deeper. A revolt of paper. You travel to the central scroll house of Memphis. It is dark. The great cedar drawers, normally bursting with tax scrolls and temple receipts, stand open, an empty dot. Only one scroll remains. You unroll it carefully. It is a poem, anonymous, flawless in style. It reads, "You ask us to write your glory. We have written your hunger. You ask us to record your order. We have written your rot. You ask us to praise your silence. We have written your screams. You let it fall. The revolt is not against your rule, it is against your words, and the power you've used to shape what is remembered. The scribes know the truth. History is not made with stone. It is made with ink, and ink now is against you. You ask your oldest advisor, blind former scribe, who copied hymns in your father's reign, why would they abandon us? He replies slowly, because they believe memory has become a lie, and they refuse to write it anymore. You begin to see the damage. Merchants cannot confirm shipments. Granaries cannot verify weight. Courts cannot issue verdicts. No scribes, no records. Even the temples grow nervous. Without scribes, the gods cannot be read. Egypt remains standing, but it can no longer remember what it did yesterday, and then a clay tablet arrives at the palace gate. It is unsigned, but stamped with the seal of the school of scribes from Thebes. It contains a request, one meeting, one truth, no guards, no throne. You agree. You arrive at the abandoned temple in Qara. Inside 20 figures, wait barefoot, heads wrapped. Papyrus scrolls at their sides like weapons. Their leader steps forward, a woman, old, quiet, steady. She says, "We are not your enemies. We are your memory. And you have taught us to record only what flatters, not what is." You ask, "And what would you write instead?" She hands you a scroll. It is titled, "The Year of Pharaoh's Silence." You read it that night. It spares nothing. It documents your triumphs, but also your errors. A village flooded due to failed irrigation. A temple collapsed due to neglected stone. A priest accused of theft, pardoned too quickly. And finally, decree you had forgotten. One that punished temple scribes for publicly questioning military orders. You remember now, you hadn't read that order. Carefully you had trusted a general. But now, it is inked, and that makes it real. You don't sleep that night. You leave the scroll open on your floor. And as dawn breaks, you sit in silence and ask yourself, If Pharaoh controls the memory of Egypt, does he also control its truth? The next morning, you do something no Pharaoh has done in generations. You walk to the temple of Thoth, without your retinue, no guards, no banners, no servants, brushing the sand from your sandals, just you, and the scroll, the one titled The Year of Pharaoh's Silence. The scribes are already waiting, not in rows, not kneeling, just standing plainly along the temple courtyard. Dozens of them, old men who once copied harvest lists, young girls who learned their glyphs only last spring, teachers, scribes, historians, they say nothing, but each holds a reed pen, as if ready to write. If you let them, you do not speak from a throne. You stand in the center of the courtyard, hands empty, and begin to read the scroll aloud. Each line, each failure, each truth. When you finish, the wind has died, and Egypt is only for a moment, feels still. You say, "This is the record of my reign. Let it be copied, let it be stored, let it be read when I am gone." One scribe steps forward. She's the one who gave you the scroll. Her name, you now learn, is Kema. She bows not deeply, but fully, she says, "Then let Pharaoh be remembered, not as perfect, but as true." The scribes return, not to your feet, but to their desks. The schools reopen. Scrolls return to granaries. Judgments are again written. The gods receive fresh prayers, but everything has changed, because now you cannot silence ink. You create a new chamber in the palace, the hall of errors. Inside it, only one rule: any citizen, priest, scribe, or merchant may submit a scroll describing an official wrongdoing. Anonymous or signed, it will be read. It will be stored, and once a season you will read one aloud yourself to the court, to the gods, to history. The nobles resist. They say, "You make yourself weak, Majesty. You expose your flaws." You respond, "It is not weakness to be remembered as real," and it begins. Scribes from across Egypt send in scrolls. Some are petty. Complaints, missed grain shipments, confused border markings. Others are more grave. A tax collector in Abydos, exploiting widows. A temple hiding grain meant for orphans. A palace guard beating a messenger for speaking too slowly. Each one is inked. Each one entered into the scroll of dust and flesh, because now even Pharaoh answers to record. You notice something else. With honesty comes a strange peace. People begin speaking differently. Merchants mark their weights more carefully. Priests document offerings without rounding. Guards greet scribes with nods and not suspicion. The ink has made Egypt more careful, not because of fear, but because of visibility. You call Kema once more. Ask her to train your grandson, not in glyphs, but in truth. She agrees, and on her first lesson scroll, she writes, "To rule is to be watched. To rule well is to welcome it." But not all agree. A general in the southern territories refuses to allow a royal historian into his camp. He claims security. He claims secrecy, but his men whisper of beatings, bribes, missing grain. You do not send soldiers. You send 6 scribes. They record every movement, every order, every ration. Within 3 weeks, the general resigns. He leaves a single line in his farewell letter: "I fear ink more than spears." Years pass. A boy grows into a student. Your grandson copies your mistakes into scrolls himself, not to shame you, but to remember. One night, you walk the hall of errors together. He asks, "Did it hurt, grandfather, to be known like this?" You answer, yes. But forgetting would have hurt Egypt more. And when the boy asks, what if a future Pharaoh tries to erase it all? You kneel beside him, point to the thousands of scrolls behind the cedar walls, and say, then may ink rise again, and may it write louder next time. The final years of your reign are quiet, but not the kind of silence you feared. This is not the hush of missing scribes, nor the cold absence of records. This is the stillness of a kingdom finally listening to itself. Scroll by scroll, Egypt rewrites its own soul. Temples keep two sets of ledgers, one for the gods, one for the people. Palace records now note not only your victories, but your failures. Scribes hold annual gatherings to review past decrees, not to praise, but to revise. For the first time in memory, Pharaoh is not a myth. Pharaoh is a man, and that, somehow, has made him more powerful than legend. You walk through the hall of errors more often now. You stop at random scrolls. Read without shame. A poor farmer's complaint about unfair land tax. A mother's petition for a wrongly arrested son. Even a forgotten case of a broken aqueduct, delayed for 2 summers because of a clerk's pride. Each mistake still lives. Each name is still red dot. You spend your final years outside the walls of the capital. You write no more ledgers, but the people remember. They bring you small sacks of flour, a carved bead, a child's sketch in charcoal. None of it counts on the temple scrolls, but all of it counts when you die. There is no procession, but at night, a group of farmers lights a small fire near your burial stone. They pour out a single handful of grain. Beside it, a gift, a thank you, a tax, perhaps paid not to gods, but to a man who measured more than numbers. And perhaps, in some dusty chamber deep in the temple, your scroll still rests, untouched, still whole, still marked with mercy, and perhaps, one day, a future scribe will read it and whisper, he gave less to the gods, but more to the people. And now, as the last grain settles, as the linen wraps one final time, and as the echo of forgotten footsteps fades into temple stone and desert wind, we close the scroll. You've walked through the quiet corridors of power, slept in red huts beside the Nile, sweated through salt and thread, and watched pharaohs become memory. You've seen that history doesn't always move through war or conquest. Sometimes it lies in a cloth folded carefully, a mouth sealed with resin, or a single line scribbled in the margin of a grain ledger. The people you met today were not kings, not warriors, not gods, but they held the kingdom together. One weighed sack of barley, one charm tucked beneath a bandage, one whispered decision that never made it into the official story. And yet, here you are. You remember, that's all they ever needed. Thank you for walking with them. Close your eyes now. Let the sand drift. Let the scroll roll shut. And may your sleep be as peaceful as a tomb, sealed with care, and a name remembered in silence. Good night. Good night.